At the start of the film, we see a man named Dae-soo who has been released from captivity after 15 years. The most awful thing is that after being released from captivity, the girl with whom he had an intimate relationship is revealed to be none other than his own daughter, Mi-do, from whom he was separated when she was 3 years old.
Then we are taken into a flashback to 15 years ago in 1988 with an incredibly alcoholic businessman named Dae-soo causing a mess among the locals. Due to his misbehavior, he was arrested, but Ja-won, one of his friends, quickly got him out on bail. Today is Dae-soo's daughter's 4th birthday, and he needs to return home as quickly as possible. He goes into a phone booth and makes a call to his house. When his daughter picks up the phone, he tells her that he is returning home and has brought her gifts. Following his phone call, Ja-won calls his home to notify them of his arrival. However, as he exits the phone booth, he discovers that Dae-soo is missing and that the gift he purchased for his daughter has been left on the road. Ja-won searches the area for him but comes up empty-handed. Meanwhile, Dae-soo opens his eyes in a locked hotel room. He instantly realizes he has been kidnapped. After a while, the pet door opens and a man slides in a meal tray. Dae-soo tries to talk to him about why he was kidnapped, but he ignores him and slams the door. Dae-soo is quite concerned about what is going on. The kidnappers released poison gas in his room, causing him to swoon. Days pass, and Dae-soo grows accustomed to his confinement. One day, the kidnappers release the gas into his room, causing him to swoon, and while he is unconscious, they enter the room and take his blood samples. The following morning, Dae-soo sees on TV that his wife had been murdered by someone and that the police suspect him of murder because they found his bloodstains there. Dae-soo immediately recognizes that his captor has framed him for the murder. He is heartbroken about the loss of his wife and is concerned about his daughter, but he is powerless to take action. In his grief, he attempts suicide, but his captors manage to give him first aid, keeping him from death. Dae-soo persists and makes another suicide attempt, but once again, his captors manage to keep him from passing away. He is now certain that he cannot commit suicide during his captivity, so he begins practicing shadow boxing with the intention of exacting revenge on his captor once he is released. Additionally, using the chopsticks he received with his food, he begins digging an escape tunnel as well. He writes the day he is passing in captivity on his arm and realizes he has spent 15 years in captivity and decides to escape tomorrow. However, the next morning, Dae-soo unexpectedly emerges from a suitcase wearing a new dress. The suitcase also contains notes he wrote while incarcerated. It's 2003, and Dae-soo is finally free after 15 years. He notices a man in front of him and goes to him, assuming he is his captor, but soon finds he is just a no-name guy preparing to jump from the top of the building. Dae-soo caresses him creepily and sniffs him because he hasn't seen a man in 15 years. He prevents him from committing suicide and demands that, if he still wishes to commit suicide, he first heard his story. Following that, Dae-soo tells him about his 15-year imprisonment and then walks away with his suitcase. As soon as Dae-soo exits the building and is about to cross the road, the man jumps from the building with his dog and dies on the spot. Dae-soo walks away with a wicked smile on his face. He decides to put his shadow boxing skills to the test by messing with a group of thieves, but he quickly defeats them all. Following this, the desperate Dae-soo stops at a seafood shop and begins staring at live sea creatures. Meanwhile, he is approached by a beggar, who hands him a mobile and a wallet full of money before walking away. The beggar pleads that he does not ask him any questions because he knows nothing. Having said that, the beggar walks away, and Dae-soo enters the food shop. He receives a call on the phone handed to him by the beggar, and when he answers it, he discovers that it is from the man who held him captive. The kidnapper inquires about his feelings about being released after 15 years. Dae-soo questions him about why he did this to him, and the kidnapper hangs up the phone, telling him to look back in his past to find out who could do this to him and why. This confuses Dae-soo even more because, according to him, he hasn't had any issues with anyone who can go to that level to seek revenge. Dae-soo orders the waitress to bring him a live octopus, which she does. He quickly rips the octopus apart and begins devouring it. Following this, he falls unconscious, and when he awakens, he finds himself in the waitress's home with her reading his written notes. He quickly retrieves his notes from her grasp and inquires as to why he is at her home. The girl introduces herself as Mi-do and informs him that she brought him to her house after he became unconscious at her shop. Then she goes into the bathroom to relieve herself, but Dae-soo, who has in 15 years, rushes inside and forces Mi-do to get intimate with her. She manages to save herself from him and refuses to be intimate with him, claiming they don't even know each other. Dae-soo is regretful of his actions and apologizes to Mi-do, who forgives him and says she, too, wants to be intimate with him, but for the time being, they are still strangers. Dae-soo informs her about his daughter, and she resolves to assist him in finding her. After some searching, Dae-soo discovers that his daughter was adopted years ago. One day, Dae-soo notices Mi-do messaging someone on the internet. When he gets closer, he notices that the ID with the name Evergreen has requested that Mi-do ask Dae-soo how he's doing in this prison. Dae-soo is suspicious, so he asks Mi-do how she knows Evergreen, to which she responds that he is her online friend and that she has been chatting with him for years. Dae-soo believes she is deceiving him and decides to track down his kidnappers on his own. He hasn't forgotten the taste of the food supplied to him during his confinement, so he devises a plan to taste the food at every local restaurant and see whether any of it tastes similar to the meal served to him in the room. After several failed attempts, Disu eventually finds a restaurant with cuisine that tastes exactly like the meal provided to him in the room for 15 years. Fortunately, he notices a rider on his way to deliver a large amount of the same food he was receiving in captivity and begins pursuing him. When Disu finally arrives at the building and stealthily enters, he discovers that it is a secret torture network. He reaches the boss, Park Ji-won, and after a rapid duel, he manages to bind him with adhesive tape. Disu inquires as to why he did this to him, to which Park responds that he was receiving a large sum of money from a mysterious man who had given him the contract to hold him captive for 15 years. Park informs him that he knows nothing about the psychopath but has recordings of his conversations with him. Disu then uses a hammer to extract 15 teeth from Park and walks away with the recordings. On his way, he is confronted by Park's men, but he manages to escape by using his shadow boxing abilities. Disu is stabbed in the back and collapses in the middle of the road from exhaustion. A man rushes up to him and places him in the taxi. The guy provides the driver with the address and the cab fare. Before the cab leaves, the man addresses Disu by name and admits to being the one who kidnapped him. He can't do anything due to his wounds, so he just stares at the man as the taxi pulls away. Disu awakens in Midu's house with her lying next to him. He immediately starts listening to the recording that he got from Park's workplace. All he learns from the recording is that the person who wanted him kidnapped did so solely because he talks too much. The next day, Disu goes to see his pal Jawan to learn whether he recognizes the voice in the recording. Jawan is overcome with emotion at seeing his friend after 15 years. After listening to the recording, he informs Disu that he is unable to identify the voice and advises him to look for the culprit among those he knows closely. Furthermore, using his internet knowledge, he managed to find Evergreen's ID, which ridicules Disu. Disu is reminded of Midu and Evergreen's conversations and feels skeptical about her aiding him for no reason. He returns home and begins torturing her in order to learn more about Evergreen. While he is torturing Midu, Jawan calls him and informs him that he has found Evergreen's address. Jawan informs him that Evergreen's actual name is Sudia and provides him with his address. Surprisingly, Sudi's flat is directly across the hall from Midu's. He dashes to the flat and meets Sudi and the security guard, Mr. Han. Sudi threatens him that he will kill Midu in 5 days if he doesn't figure out how he was kidnapped. He continues by saying that if he finds out what caused this, he will commit suicide. Enraged, Disu tries to kill him, but his guard overcomes him. Sudi then explains that he has a pacemaker implanted near his heart and that if he tries to attack him again, he can deactivate it with a simple click, resulting in his death, and he will remain clueless about why he got kidnapped. In the end, Sudi informs Disu that he left Midu alone in her flat. In the meantime, Disu hears Midu screaming and rushes back to the flat. There, he witnesses Park and his men harassing the lone Midu. They have ripped her clothes and are abusing her. Disu tries to free her, but Park's men manage to seize him and bring him before Park. Park is preparing to extract his teeth with a hammer, just as he did to him. Meanwhile, he receives a phone call after which the doorbell rings and Mr. Han arrives with a suitcase full of cash. He gives it to Park in exchange for Disu and Midu's safety. He consents to take the cash and leave without harming Disu. Disu threatens Park with the amputation of his hand for touching Midu. Following this, Disu and Midu decide to vacate the flat. On their way to a hotel, Midu, with tears in her eyes, sings a song for Disu and signals to him that she is willing to have sex with him. In the hotel room, the lovebirds experience their first intimacy in a very passionate way. After they have finished having sex and are snoozing, Sudi releases a poisonous gas to make the lovebirds unconscious. He enters the room, lies with them for a few minutes, and then departs, leaving an unexpected present for Disu. The next morning, when they wake up, they are astounded to see the gift box. When they open the box, they discover Park's severed hand inside and realize that Sudi is watching them or listening in on every conversation. They walk to a shop, and after looking through Disu's clothes, the shopkeeper discovers the voice recorder in his shoe and disposes of it. Later that day, they go to Jawan's internet cafe and tell him everything that has happened to them. Then, while searching for Evergreen on the web, Midu discovers that Evergreen was the name of a high school student's batch. She informs Disu and Jawan about it, and they quickly recall that it was the name of their high school's batch. They believe it's a clue, so Disu and Midu rush to the school. They enter the record-keeping area and begin inspecting the 1979 student album. After some searching, Disu notices that a girl named Lee Sua's photo has been wiped from every group photo, but her name still exists. Confused, he phones Jawan and asks if he knows anything about her. At first, Jawan is unable to recall Sua, but after a moment's thought, he informs Disu that she was their classmate who died shortly after he left the school. Disu requests that he tell him everything he knows about her, to which Jawan responds that she was known as a harlot at their school, which led to her suicide. To their surprise, Sudi is also present in Jawan's cyber cafe, and when he hears Jawan's words regarding Sua, he loses his cool and kills him. Sudi then informs Disu that Su is not a harlot, but his sister. Hearing this, Jisoo comprehends that Evergreen's real name is Lee Woojin, his classmate. He becomes enraged and upset as a result of the loss of his dearest friend, and he vows to exact revenge at any cost. After losing his friend Ja-won, he is afraid of losing his love, Mi-do, so he leaves her with Park, who is now his friend, and also wants to exact revenge on Woojin for severing his hand. Then Jisoo tries to remember his past when he was in high school. He struggles for a while before recalling that he once witnessed Soo and Woojin having incest. He informed Ja-won about it and cautioned him not to tell anyone, but as Jisoo left the school, he spread this information around the whole school. This information quickly spread, and everyone began to degrade her for having sex with his brother and becoming pregnant. Jisoo realizes this is why Woojin has kept him captive for 15 years and goes to his penthouse to confront him. He approaches Woojin and tells him all that he witnessed between him and his sister. He also admits to him that he wasn't responsible for Sua's death and that he hadn't spread the news of them being involved in a sexual relationship. Woojin then discloses that Sua was not pregnant in reality, but the rumor had become so terrible that Sua began to believe she was and committed herself. Even after hearing everything, Woojin still blames Jisoo for his sister's death, claiming that if he hadn't spotted them having love, Sua would still be alive. Hearing this, Jisoo tells Woojin that he murdered his own sister because he didn't want the public to know about their incestuous relationship. Woojin ignores this and tells Jisoo about how he used a hypnotist to set up the encounter between Jisoo and Mi-do. Following this, Woojin directs Jisoo to a gift box and instructs him to open it, which he does, and discovers a family album containing photos of Jisoo's wife and daughter. As he scrolls through the pages, he notices images of his daughter growing up, and to his dismay, his daughter is none other than Mi-do, with whom he is sexually involved. Frustrated by what he has just learned, he attempts to attack Woojin, but Mr. Han stops him, and the two begin a duel with Mr. Han having the upper hand. He manages to injure Mr. Han, but he is on the verge of defeat. However, after watching them fight for a long time, Woojin draws out his gun and shoots Mr. Han, who dies on the spot. Then he tells Jisoo another painful truth, that Park is still working for him, and Mi-do is in their custody. Woojin immediately phones Park and notifies Jisoo that Mi-do has been provided with the same gift box and is going to open it. Jisoo shouts over the phone, telling her not to open the box at any cost. He begins pleading with Woojin not to reveal anything to Mi-do. Moreover, he adopts Woojin's dog persona and starts barking as a symbol of his surrender to him. Jisoo realizes Woojin is still not convinced, so he cuts his tongue after vowing that he is never going to talk again. Seeing this, Woojin agrees and advises Park to keep the present box sealed and not tell Mi-do anything. Having said so, he begins to walk away but inadvertently drops the remote control for his pacemaker on the floor. Jisoo clicks the button rapidly, believing Woojin will die, but it simply plays an audio tape of him and Mi-do moaning while having sex. While descending in a lift, Woojin recalls the time Sua died when he attempted but failed to stop her from committing suicide. As the lift doors open, Woojin shoots himself in the head and dies on the spot. Sometime later, Jisoo meets a hypnotist in the countryside. He tells her his story by writing it down on paper and asks her to erase his memories, particularly the memory that Mi-do is his daughter. She initially objects, claiming that it is risky, so in an effort to convince her, he repeats the statement made by the man on the rooftop, "Even though I'm nothing more than a beast, don't I have the right to live?" Upon hearing this, the hypnotist agrees to do what he wants. She advises Jisoo that something may go wrong and he may be unable to recollect anything, but Jisoo insists on doing it at all costs. She cautions Jisoo that his thoughts will be divided into two personas, one of which will not remember anything he does not wish to remember, while the other will remember everything. Following that, she begins her hypnosis. After a while, Jisoo wakes up shivering from the cold, and Mi-do rushes over to help warm him up. She hugs him and tells him she can't live without him. Upon learning about Mi-do's emotions for him, Jisoo smiles, but the grin soon fades into a tone of sorrow and sadness, indicating that the hypnosis may not have been successful and that he still recognizes Mi-do as his daughter, and this is where the movie ends.
I hope you enjoyed the recap. If so, then give this video a thumbs up. And yes, if you want to be the first to know about my new videos, hit the subscribe button right now. It may seem worthless to you, but it is a huge motivator for me to keep going. I'll see you in my next video. Have fun and keep watching the Movie Explainer.